Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Two Bald Guys. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm a senior policy fellow at the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, otherwise known as WIPS. Today, we're excited for another fantastic guest who will be joining us and discussing how local government is changing the face of America.
Hi, Dave, and thank you. Good to see you. Welcome. My name is Eric Giordano, and I'm the Executive Director of WIPS. WIPS is a unit of the University of Wisconsin system, founded in 2007 with a mission to address community-identified needs, provide research-driven solutions, educate and engage Wisconsin residents, and develop future leaders. And speaking of addressing identified needs, Dave, I am really excited to let you know that I immediately following today's show, I'm off to get my second Moderna COVID vaccine. So I'm really kind of looking forward to that, although I'm a little worried about maybe getting a bit of a negative reaction. Have you had the vaccination yet?
I had my first the week before, and I did have a little bit of a negative reaction, but you know what? Just having the knowledge that I've had the first shot, I think has really been great, and I can hardly wait till next week when I get my second.
Yeah, me too. And if you don't think, I hope our audience realizes it's not a secret that we here at Two Bald Guys do believe in evidence-based practices and encourage everyone to get vaccinated when and how you can. We all want to get through this pandemic as safely as we can and as soon as we can. But that got me thinking about some of the reasons why some people who are eligible for the vaccine haven't been getting vaccinated. For example, there's some theories out there that suggest we cannot trust what's actually in the vaccines, ranging from microchip implants to harmful chemicals. And in response to these concerns, Dave, there's been some really interesting responses on social media that caught my eye, and I wanted to share a couple if you don't mind. So here are a few of my favorites. This is from @Jordan Stratton. You won't take a vaccine because you don't know what's in it? Real quick, name all the ingredients in a Pop-Tart. I like that one. If you've ever sat on a couch in a high school theater department's dressing room, don't worry about what's in the vaccine. That's from @OnlyTory. And I love that one because my kids were in theater, and trust me, there were a lot of scary couches in the backstage. Here's another one from @Kelly McCarthy. If you've ever used a porta potty, don't worry about what is in the vaccine. Or here's another one for you parents. If your mom lets you play in a McDonald's playhouse, you don't need to worry about what's in the vaccine. That's from Female Redhead. And finally, the last one is if you've ever applied the 5-second rule when your food falls on the floor, you don't need to worry about what's in the vaccine. Thank you, ADH Dean, for that.
Eric, you made me think of another one here. If you've ever used a hair product, you don't need to worry about what's in a vaccine. I mean, look at what all these hair product enhancers have done for me.
Right, nothing but good. I can see that.
And now it's time to acknowledge and thank our hardworking producer, marketing specialist, chill hop DJ, and of course, that token representative of an attractive younger generation, Luke Rudolph. Greetings, Luke.
Hey guys, so good to see you again. It's been forever, and I just want to tell you I'm very excited today for two reasons. First, the show, Two Bald Guys, is now available as a podcast. If you're ever like me and you're going through Two Bald Guys withdrawals, you can listen to the show on the go. Check it out on Spotify and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm also excited because this Monday, we are going to have the renowned historian and author Doris Kearns Goodwin presenting the Public Issues Series lecture, Leadership in Turbulent Times. That'll be this Monday, April 12th at 7 p.m. You do not want to miss the opportunity to hear her speak. You can register for the event at whips.org/DKG, and I will be pasting that into the chat.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate that and some incredible words of wisdom. And I would just add that if you are experiencing Two Bald Guys withdrawal, I would recommend you see your favorite mental health specialist as soon as possible. If you have a joke or pun to share, a comment about the show, you can write them in the Facebook chat. Or if you're watching the show later via the podcast, you can email us at info@whips.org. That's info@WIPPS.org. And Dave, as I think that means we're ready to get right to our show, to our guest.
Well, I am really excited about our guest today, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome to talk about how local government is changing the face of America, none other than Jerry DeShane, Executive Director of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Hey, Jerry, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning, Dave. Good morning, Eric. And I'm honored to be here. Does this make me an honorary bald guy? I'm working on it. I'm kind of getting there.
If you work
There
a
you
little
go.
harder, maybe.
There you go. Well, working with the league board and staff, Jerry's responsible for engaging appointed and elected city and village officials throughout the state, keeping track of work with municipal leaders on legislative processes, and also motivating state policymakers to support vibrant Wisconsin communities. He's actually the 5th league executive director since the organization was founded in 1898. And on a personal note, I have to tell you that Jerry and I go back a long time. Probably the early 80s, if not before. But when we first met, Jerry was working in the media, and I was a young whippersnapper running for the Wisconsin State Legislature. He was the guy asking me questions. Well, today I finally can get even because I'm the guy asking him questions. So the script that we have, we're not going to worry about any script here today.
You've been waiting 40 years for your revenge.
I have. I have. Oh my gosh. But with that, we are going to jump right into the questions. And first of all, Jerry, maybe we can just set the stage a little bit. From the perspective of someone who works day in and day out with municipal leaders, is there something fundamentally different about the overall landscape in which municipal leaders must operate today compared to in the past? In other words, what's truly new or different from, say, 5, 10, or 15 years ago? I started out I was a town chairman during that same time frame when Jerry and I first met. And I know as I follow town government, even though I'm no longer involved at that level, a lot of things have changed. We'd love to get your perspective on what you've observed over the years.
Yeah, Dave, I would say there are basically 2 fundamental changes. One is gradual. The other one is, well, it wasn't abrupt, but it wasn't nearly as gradual. Running local government is getting more complicated every year. And, welcome to the world, right? Welcome to the 21st century. Quite often when you were on the town board back in the 80s and the 70s, Dave, the concern was, well, are we grading the roads properly? Are we plowing the snow? That still matters. In fact, for most local officials, that's still the most important thing in the world. But it has all become far more complicated. We all saw how elections had to be reinvented last year, and that's going to spur a whole round of legislation that's going to require elections to be reinvented in some other way. The paperwork keeps getting more complicated. We'll talk about this Federal Recovery Act probably a little later in the show. Boy, you talk about Mayberry meeting the Beltway. Some of those town governments and village governments in Wisconsin are in for a very scary paperwork shock. But the other thing, and this one frankly concerns me even more, is that the word compromise, which at least in my, the history teachers, the guys that I knew back in the 70s and 80s, compromise is the essence of democracy. You and I are not going to see things the same way. That's why you have 3, 4, 5, 8, 9 people on a village board. It used to be that, okay, we have to get together and figure out what we can live with. Well, compromise went from an essential skill and the art of to a category that they now call sin. It's a sin to compromise, it seems. Not everywhere, but in too many places. And I don't want to be dramatic, but the bottom line is representative government does not work if you cannot compromise. Because you and I are going to you and I will agree on 99 things, and then we're going to get stuck on that 100th thing. And if we can't compromise and come up with a middle ground, local government can't move forward. So my big concern there, and we've actually hired whips and Eric to help us in this. We just need to do a little bit of civics re-education in this country. It's not unique to Wisconsin. It didn't start here. We haven't perfected it, but we sure as heck need to work on it. So.
Thanks, Jerry, and thanks for that unsolicited plug. Really appreciate that. But want to switch gears just a little bit to another big picture issue that, I mean, has been around since local government has existed in the federalist United States, which is, we have a 10th Amendment, and it says that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. It's that last part, that to the states or to the people. Since the ratification, we've been interpreting and reinterpreting local control, that term, for a long time. Give us an overview of the state of local control in Wisconsin. Like, what powers do the states have? What powers the local government has? Where are there tensions, especially, recently with certain areas of local control? And key issues that your constituency, your mayors, your appointed executives are really having to deal with in terms of their interaction with state government.
The biggest problem with the United States Constitution, Eric, they forgot to mention local government. And I'm being facetious. I don't think that's a problem. But when you rattled off, that language in the 10th Amendment, it does not mention local government. Local governments, in fact, are not in the federal Constitution, and they're just kind of tangentially acknowledged in the state Constitution. Even though, City of New York existed long before the US Constitution. City of Green Bay, when was that founded? 1634 was when Jean Nicolet established a fur trading post there. The constitutional deal, if you will, is that the state basically holds the power, and local control is essentially as long as the state leash allows it to be. When I started working for the league, we've been publishing a magazine since 1900, which is really cool because we've kept this library of all the back issues, and you can go back to whatever era you want, the 70s, the 60s, the 40s, the 20s, 1900 itself. And there's a constant theme. The state is telling us what to do. The state is telling us what to do. It's frankly a never-ending frustration. Is it getting any worse today? Honestly, no. Is it getting any better? Absolutely not. I think the biggest sort of link in the chain, if I got to stick with my leash metaphor now that I started it, is of course levy limits. Wisconsin has the strictest property tax limits in the country. Well, if you control my wallet, you control me 100%. There are some local control things that I think are just downright silly. I mean, the state's ban on local governments banning plastic bags, or the state's ban on local governments banning big soda pops, that almost falls under the category of trivia. It's like, just go away. But ever since the state was established, it has been telling cities and villages what they can and cannot do. That's simply a nature of the beast. It is very frustrating at times. I'm a Catholic, so I believe in, what's the term they use for it? Subsidiarity. And it's a philosophy that says all problems should be resolved at the most local level possible. And what they mean basically was, you're the parish priest, you figure it out, don't ask the Pope. But that applies to local government just as well. And that's what local control is. There's a reason why you don't go to Madison and say, should we repave 3rd Avenue? It just makes no sense whatsoever. I'm preaching, so feel free to mute my microphone at any point or follow up with another question, because there's this struggle of where's the line to be drawn. I frankly think it's been drawn too tightly. I think you can trust local elected officials, and Gallup has been running a survey, that thing where they talk about trust in government. Well, the dirty little secret is the federal government always ranks badly. States always rank sort of But then local government, the trust in local government is far higher. And that is simply because I know you, I know when you're going to be in the grocery store, I know where your kids play soccer. People are more confident in government when it's close to them.
You know, your sermon does lead right into my next question,
We'll
which is
try to
definitely
make the answer to this one shorter, Dave.
which is definitely right. And I meant that kiddingly, of course. That it wasn't a sermon; it was very interesting perspective. But here's my question: Is it a perception, or is it a reality that municipalities today are offering and passing more referenda on a variety of topics, whether they're resolutions about social issues or even a non-binding statement about policy issues that once seemed to be kind of the purview of the state or federal government? It just seems like there's a lot more of that happening at the local level. Are you observing that too?
I have to be honest with you. I think that occurs more at the county level than at the local level. Somebody, and I have to talk to my friends over at the counties sometime about this. Somebody decided that it would make a difference if, a bunch of counties could pass a statement on local control, or a bunch of counties would pass a statement on redistricting. Maybe I'm just a cynical old lobbyist, but I frankly think that's just a lot of hot air that really doesn't help. I'm not a big fan of binding resolutions. I just don't. Okay, if it makes you feel better, go for it. So, no, I don't think you see much of that at the municipal level. I think you tend to see it more at the county level. A big reason for that, Dave, is as you guys know, the Wisconsin is this state of small cities. Yeah, the median sized city and village in Wisconsin, the middle, has a population of 1,500. Most of our villages are very small. They have very part-time local governments. They're just not interested in getting into a federal or a national public policy debate. It just doesn't happen that often. So I don't know. You see it differently, yeah. David?
I appreciate the perspective. Like I said, I think maybe it is more of a perception than a reality. But you do raise an interesting point that as someone who's been a local official both at the town and county level, have also worked at the state and federal level. I've always been intrigued by by the relationship between municipal and county government, and kind of the push and pull and the tug that sometimes exists. Do you have any reflections on that? Or I mean, how is that tension? Can it be positive? Is it negative? Can it be? I mean, what do you see generally happening with that tension between the levels of local government?
Well, and this has nothing to do with the fact that cities are the people that sign my paycheck, but frankly, I think counties should just get out of the way. There is that tension. I live in Dane County, down near Madison, and there is frequently friction there between the cities and the counties, between the villages, well, and frankly, between the villages and the city of Madison. Yeah, wherever you have overlapping responsibilities and jurisdictions, and frankly, where you have abutting responsibilities and jurisdictions, you're going to get friction. I think for the most part, local governments handle that well. When there's an emergency, you don't hear the sheriff quibbling with the police chief. They send squad cars, right? When there's a fire, you don't hear the city of Madison haggling with the village of DeForest. They send additional equipment as needed. So when it's critical, the cooperation is there. I do think, though, that you run into turf disputes, you run into philosophical We don't think land use patterns ought to be this way, ought to be that way. So yeah, you're going to run into those things. But I think that sort of gets back to the nature of humanity and representative democracy. I just don't think you could design a system and design that out of a system, until we're all wearing white robes and we sprout wings out our back. And for me, that may take longer than for many people. No, you're right. That's there. I think the good news, Dave, is I don't think it's any worse than it's ever been.
Mhm.
And I don't see it on a trajectory going up, going down, either one of those. I also think you didn't ask about townships, but I think particularly in growing urban areas, you get some friction between towns and cities. That's something that we struggle with a lot. And part of it is because Wisconsin land use law sort of sets us up for that. The only way that a city or village can grow its budget is to grow its property tax base. And to take the town's perspective on that, right when they've got some good growth areas, the city says, hey, that's a good growth area. Whoop.
Right.
And the property owner makes an application for annexation and it's gone. Now, the sad reality for the town is that's the way the law intended it. That's how cities grow their property tax base. But that gets into the whole question of we should reform how we fund local government, which is a whole other chapter in this book.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jerry. And this is very helpful. We're going to pivot to a topic that actually came about because of an email exchange we had where you used the term, and you used it earlier today, this Mayberry meeting the Beltway concept. So something new has come about recently, right, with the federal legislation that's been passed to help out local governments and municipalities, in this COVID pandemic economic crisis situation that we found ourselves in. So I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit on that legislation and what impact it's having on local municipalities.
Yeah, the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA, A-R-P-A. I hate the fact that we name our laws. But anyway, ARPA, let's use the acronym. $2.9 trillion is going to be funneled out into the country. Well, 350 billion of that is going to states and local governments. And for the first time in US history, they're going to actually cut a check for every town, city, village, county in the country, all over them. Dave, you were town of Hazelhurst, right?
Correct. Good memory.
Okay, Hazelhurst is going to get a check from the federal government. In all likelihood, the town of Hazelhurst has never handled federal paperwork before. And it's not just towns. Village of Kikoski is going to go through the same thing. The city of Madison has a finance department with a dozen CPAs working in the finance department. The problem is half of Wisconsin exists on what is basically part-time government. They are not used to Davis-Bacon Act federal labor regulations. They are not used to what's called and I wasn't even aware of this term before I started with the league, the single audit requirement. If you get a certain dollar amount of money from the federal government, there's an audit that has to be done every year where someone comes in and questions, well, Mr. Giordano, show me the invoices. How did you spend this federal money? We've got to protect the taxpayers. So, tell me why you bought that color of asphalt instead of that color of asphalt. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but my point about the Mayberry comment is that half of Wisconsin is run by part-time government. These are village trustees who have a real job during the day, and it ain't doing what you and I do. They don't sit around and think about how to comply with government paperwork. And the league has a real concern that if the Beltway, if Washington doesn't understand that, many of these cities and villages will either get themselves in trouble unknowingly, which is a shame, or they'll simply look at the money and look at the strings attached and go, nope, you can keep it, take it back. And I think either one is a really bad outcome. that does not help the tax-paying citizens of the state of Wisconsin. So, boy, you guys have got to start interrupting me, man. I'm just
No, this is helpful. I was just hoping that the city of Wausau, where I live, was just going to pass it right on to me. But is that not likely to happen? No, but seriously, in a follow-up question, I mean, we're talking about some money, but it's not world-changing money. I mean, what are they going to do with this money, do you think? What are you hearing from mayors and appointed executives about what they're thinking about doing?
Oh my goodness, you don't have enough time on your program. By the way, your Mayor Rosenberg, I don't have favorites, but she's one of my favorites. Really interesting and engaging person, but also someone who knows how to use modern media. We'll go there later. Yeah, you're right. I mean, some of our smallest communities are going to get a check for $10,000. What do you do with $10,000? You can't buy a truck with it. You can't repave a block of 3rd Avenue with it. One of the things we're doing, there's a lot of idea swapping going on right now. The league itself is having weekly webinar calls with members, not so much that I can sit and talk at them, but so that they can talk to each other. The administrator up in the city of Clintonville, wonderful woman named Sharon Eveland, has already put a plan together. They're going to take, I think they're getting $100,000 or something. They're going to use it to wipe out past due utility bills. A lot of their residents who got nailed by the pandemic owe the city a lot of money for water, sewer, whatever bills. They're going to use it to wipe out some of those utility bills. There is talk about using it for small business support. Our mom and pop restaurants just got shellacked by the pandemic, and you can use it for small business support. City of Brookfield just opened a convention center last year. Talk about really bad timing. But again, you can use it to fill revenue holes. The other thing we want to see people do often is nothing. We want them to just step back. You got until 2024 to spend this money. Just take a deep breath. Think about this. Maybe have a couple of public meetings where you let people come in and talk about different ideas. One of my city managers came in, his public works director came in, and this is one of the cities. They're getting $20 million. This is real money. Public works guy came in and says, I got your problem fixed for you. You don't need to worry about public hearings. You don't need to worry about anything. I've got a 100-year-old well that needs to be replaced that costs $20 million. So there will be no shortage of ideas, but we want people to slow down and think about this. This is a once in a lifetime thing. Use it that way. Don't use it to just say, well, let's hire another half-time clerk. Because guess what? In 2023, the money to pay that clerk is going to be gone. We haven't even gotten into collaboration. A number of towns and villages, if they're only getting $10,000 or a small amount of money, pool it. There's got to be a regional economic project that you've all been wishing you can do. Throw that money together in a pot and work with it that way. So
yeah, well, it's helpful to kind of hear some of the examples. Thanks for sharing that. I find that very enlightening. I want to switch gears a little bit. I've had the pleasure of working with you, Jerry, as you've mentioned, and moderating a few discussions that you've had with your city managers and elected officials across Wisconsin. And I've been struck by a few recurring themes that I've heard in some of these conversations, one of which is the intense pressure, and you mentioned this earlier, that local leaders are under thanks to the advent of social media. I mean, it seems like on the drop of a dime, just in a moment, something can happen either nationally or locally that just has immediate ramifications for local leaders in ways that just didn't used to be the case, or at least not so intensely. And then suddenly they're thrust in, in the midst of a crisis, which is exacerbated by social media. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and how municipal leaders are coping and reacting with this kind of widespread phenomenon.
Oh man, another program. Back in the day, way back when Dave Anderson was a candidate for the legislature, the reporters that he dealt with were professionals. They were gentlemen. I'm talking about myself here. I'm waiting for Dave. It was a much slower process. Even though I could take his interview and have it on the air half an hour later, today I could take Eric Giordano's offhand comment coming out of the restroom and spread it around to the entire world in 15 seconds or less.
Right.
As fast as my thumbs would move, I could get out a tweet. The first part of that problem is half the time what we're tweeting is not necessarily as accurate as it should be. I'm of two thoughts on this, Eric, because you're right. Local governments do struggle with this. Sometimes you think that social media brings out the worst in people. I've seen social media do some wonderful things. I mean, organizing peace marches, or frankly, as simple as, our local Knights of Columbus, we had a fundraiser for the food pantry down here. And it was a real simple fundraiser. We just put out there on Facebook, hey, we're going to be in the church parking lot for 3 hours with a bucket. Come by and drop something in it. Well, we raised $9,000.
Wow.
Social media can do some really cool things like that. Unfortunately, it can also just stir up a mess in a big, fast hurry. One thought is, okay, if you're a 21st century elected official, you've got to take a lesson from Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan, John F. Kennedy, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You have to learn to use the media of your age. And social media is the media of your age. And, who's good at this? Former mayor of Appleton, Tim Hanna, used to be really good. Well, he was mayor for 20 some odd years, so he spanned a couple media generations. But he had a really good working relationship with newspapers and then with his television people. He was also fairly good on social media. And Tim's mantra was, I tell people the truth, and I also tell them that I trust them. And I think that's part of it, is you have to be real. You have to, and I think I need to back up on this, Eric, because I've thought of something else that you and I have talked about. The notion of goodwill banking. You got to be a trustworthy local public servant, and you've got to do that day in and day out. Because what happens is people build up either a sense of trust or a sense of distrust. If what I'm doing just never quite passes the smell test, then on that day when the stuff hits the fan, chances are the public is going to turn against me in a heartbeat. But on the other hand, if I've been a fairly honest and open guy and a straight shooter, when I have that bad day, or there's that real, hey, what in the world is the city doing? If I've built up that trust with the public, 9 times out of 10 in my experience, they will pay that back. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt. They're still going to question you, as they should. I mean, democracy should always be about skepticism and questioning. But if you've built up that trust over time, then what I have found is that people will tend to reward you for that. But again, I don't love social media. Before the program today, we were talking about Facebook. I will exchange Facebook comments with 1 or 2 of my brothers and sisters, but there are also 3 or 4 of them that I will not talk to on Facebook, just because the conversation goes negative in a big hurry. Social media is, boy, the teeth on that dog are really sharp, but it's what we have. It's what we have today.
What are 1 or 2 issues that you think municipal leaders have a hard time sleeping when they think about? What keeps them up at night? What are some of the big picture things that our leaders are concerned about at the local level?
Boy, Well, I think the universe, there's going to be a universal one, but then there's going to be some that affect some communities and not others. The universal one, Dave, is money. I mentioned at the beginning of this program that Wisconsin has the tightest property tax limits in the country. That's true. We'll debate all day long whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? But the simple fact of the matter is it's getting more and more complicated to do the job of local government. And because we are so state controlled, we have very little flexibility in the tools for responding to that. So money is always going to be a problem. I will tell you that there are a frightening number of cities and villages out there that are right now borrowing money for operating costs. And that, I mean, if you've ever run a small business, that is send up the red flare, call in the accountants, bad. But there are a number of local governments in Wisconsin that just, there's not enough money there to pay the basic bills. And these are not, we're not talking about frivolous bills here. We're talking about the basics. So money is a universal, whether you're Tom Barrett in Milwaukee, Katie Rosenberg in Wausau, or Amy Grandaw. Amy Grandaw is the new village president in the village of Crivets, where I grew up. Money is gonna be the big issue. If you have a diverse population, racial equity is a big issue. And that could come in a variety of issues or a variety of shapes and sizes. You know, everyone assumes this is a Black Lives Matter issue. Well, no, not necessarily, not everywhere. There are a lot of rural communities in Wisconsin where there's a large Hispanic population because a lot of Hispanic immigrants have been drawn to Wisconsin's ag industry, both the food processing part of it and also the farming part of it. And in some of those communities, there's separation and bad blood between people that look like you and me, you know, kind of the pasty-faced folks, and those whose skin is a little darker. That's an issue. I know it's an issue because I get phone calls on it. Obviously, if you're the mayor of Wauwatosa, you're the mayor of Kenosha, you're the mayor of Madison, Milwaukee, or I could run down that list quite a ways, frankly, and frankly, further than either of you might think. A lot of those mayors are one bad incident away from protests, you know, and away from things kind of spiraling out of control for a little while. So that keeps them up at night. And that's something, by the way, the league is going to be paying a lot of attention to, working with our members and helping them through dialogues on those subjects. You know, other than that, every community's got its thing. You know, the DNR is concerned about, oh, I can't say the name of the chemical. It's
PFAS.
Yeah,
PFAS.
I was going to try to show off my smart.
Go ahead.
It stands for polyfluoral. Whatever.
Another term is forever chemicals. They sometimes call them.
But yeah, I mean, and the problem with forever chemicals, you can't filter the suckers out of your system. That's a big one. You know, a lot of communities are still struggling with phosphorus, which is one of the main ingredients in cow manure. Well, guess what? We live in America's dairy land. We're not going to get rid of that anytime soon. So there are those issues. And then, you know, and then it's whatever the local, what do you want to call it? The local issue du jour, Dave. And they come in an incredible variety of shapes and sizes.
Absolutely.
And they're about as diverse as Wisconsin itself.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting just to hear, you know, I think sometimes we forget the depth of and the breadth really of issues that municipal leaders deal with. I mean, day in and day out. And of course, you as in a way a writ large representative of all of them have got to hear about this all the time. So your perspective is really fascinating. I want to sort of end on a more positive note, which is, and you mentioned earlier, which surveys continue to show that despite all the challenges in America, trust in local government is certainly higher in comparison to trust in state government and federal government and so on. And, and I continue to just be a believer, for better or worse, that, local government can be the answer to really getting back to a healthy, democratic system. So I want to kind of turn to the positive and ask you, what brings you optimism as you go around the state of Wisconsin? You're listening to these leaders. Are there innovations going on? Are there examples of some good things happening that you'd like to share that we ought to know about?
Yes, absolutely. And this is, can you be a pragmatic idealist? Because I think that's what I am. Democracy is messy and it's ugly, and sometimes it makes you shake your head and scream and do other stuff, but it also does some pretty cool stuff. It rights itself over time. I read an article, let's start with race equity. The league is working with the National League of Cities on a race equity project where basically, because we're the league, we don't ever do anything directly. We're just here to support Wausau, to support Grantsburg and Abbotsford, with whatever it is they want to do. But we're going to bring in some national experts to help our communities put in place a process to have these conversations if they want to. I read every morning. Part of my routine is to kind of read a scan of news articles from around the state, local news. And this morning, I read that the city of Burlington is bringing someone in to have a discussion on race. And if you know Burlington, it's a very conservative community. It is not the place you would have thought, oh yeah, they're going to have a racial equity discussion. But they are. And that's the cool thing about it. I think there's so much goodwill among us that we forget about. I mean, we tweet about each other, and Dave picks on me because the question I asked him 40 years ago wasn't fair. And when Eric comes back with his, so we tend to focus on disagreement, but there really is an incredible amount of agreement out there. Oh, fiscal reform is another one. And I know everybody's going to fall asleep now, but we really don't finance local government right in Wisconsin. We are the only state that relies on property taxes to pay for schools, to pay for cities, to pay for counties, pay for everything we're doing at the local level. But even with that, there's some conservative legislators who are taking a real good hard look at that. John Mako over in Green Bay, Dale Coinga down in the Wauwatosa area. Nothing is going to happen quick because that's a tough issue, but they are taking a look at it and they're making progress. So I guess the bottom line is my greatest cause for hope, Eric, is just us. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is from the cartoon Pogo. It says, "We have met the enemy and he is us." We have also met our salvation and he is us. Everything that's broken or bent or limping in this country, representative democracy can hand us the tools to fix it. Might not be pretty, might not be perfect. Chances are it won't be perfect, but it'll move us down the road. And so that's why I say I'm a pragmatic idealist. I've just seen it work way too many times to give up hope for it.
Wow, that's great. I really appreciate that perspective, Jerry. Thanks so much. And we're at the end of our show, believe it or not. And once again, the time has flown by, sort of like Dave's toupee during an April rainstorm. So Jerry, we are so
grateful. Write that one down.
So Jerry, we're so grateful for you. We're thankful for what you do, for who you are, for taking the time to share with us some of your very thoughtful information. And apologies to our friend, our normal guest, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, for running out of time, but we'll certainly see him again next week. Jerry, I'm wondering, in the last minute or so we have, can you tell us a little bit about anything coming up with the league, or how people can get more information if they'd like about what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. Well, as you know, we just had an election this week, right? So we turned over about 20% of the local elected people. The league is running a boot camp. We call it Local Gov 101. And since I suspect there's a fair number of my bosses listening in, if you're new or if you need a refresher course, go to one of those Local Gov 101 courses. They're being held virtually. In the fall, they'll be held in person. But that and everything else is at our website, lwm-info.org. You can sign up for Local Gov 101. You can hear about all the other stuff that's going on, learn about how to do your ARPA paperwork, God save us all. But those are just a few things. Our website is a pretty good resource.
Absolutely. I've been there many times, and it certainly is. And one last shameful plug for our audience: don't forget to register for the Doris Kearns Goodwin event on April 12th at 7 p.m. That'll be a virtual speaking event called Leadership in Turbulent Times. You can go to wipps.org/DKG. That's whips.org/DKG. Thank you both. Good to see you. Have a wonderful weekend.
And Jerry, thanks for joining us. Great to see you again. And we really appreciated having you on the show today. And just a reminder to our viewers to be sure to tune in 2 weeks for the next fantastic episode of Two Bald Guys.
Thanks, gentlemen. I really enjoyed it.